Welcome to another episode where we dive deep into the latest in recruitment strategies, AI innovations, and HR solutions. If you're looking to elevate your hiring game and stay ahead in the ever-evolving world of talent acquisition, you're in the right place. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an episode filled with insights, expert interviews, and actionable tips to transform your recruitment approach. Stay tuned for exclusive content designed to make your hiring process smarter, faster, and more effective.
Welcome to a deep dive, into this whole world of AI and recruitment. It's, where algorithms meet applications and everyone's resumes hopefully get a fair shot.
Yeah, it's a fascinating intersection for sure. We're seeing AI do some pretty incredible things in recruitment these days, like sifting through, you know, thousands of resumes in seconds to find those hidden gems. But of course, it's not without its challenges.
Right, exactly. And that's what we're digging into today. It's like, how do we make sure that these AI hiring tools are actually fair? And, this source material really got me thinking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest questions is like, how do we even define fairness in the first place?
Right.
Like, are we aiming for equal representation across different, demographic groups? Or are we focusing on making sure that each individual is evaluated fairly, regardless of their background? I mean, these sources kind of dive into all these different definitions, and it's honestly way more complex than you might think.
Yeah. It really is. It reminds me of that case with Amazon a few years back where they were testing an AI recruitment tool that ended up favoring resumes with words like executed or captured, terms that are more common in resumes for men.
Oh, totally. Yeah, exactly. That case really highlighted how those historical biases can like creep into these AI systems if we're not super careful about it,
Yeah.
Because if the data that's used to train the AI reflects those past inequalities, the AI can actually learn to associate those patterns with success, even if they have nothing to do with actual job performance.
So how do we prevent that? Because, ideally, AI should be helping us remove bias from hiring, not amplifying it.
Right. And these sources offer some really interesting strategies. So one thing that companies are doing is using something called demographic parity as like a metric. So essentially what that means is they're checking if different groups are kind of being hired at relatively similar rates. And if not, it could be a red flag that the AI system needs, a closer look.
Okay, so that's one way to kind of measure fairness. But what about transparency? Like if you get rejected for a job and it's based on an AI's decision,
Yeah.
you want to know why, right? It can't just be a black box.
Absolutely. And this source, really digs into that whole idea. One of the big things that companies are focusing on is building what's called explainable AI.
Explainable AI. So the AI has to explain its reasoning.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not enough to just get a yes or no from an algorithm. We need to be able to understand the factors that led to that decision to make sure it was based on, like merit and not some hidden bias in the data.
Can you give an example of what that would look like in practice?
Yeah, for sure. Let's say an AI system, rejects a candidate for a software engineering role. With explainable AI, you would be able to see that the system flagged, let's say, a lack of experience with a specific programming language as like a key factor. Now, this allows for human oversight to step in and consider, well, did the job description actually list that language as a requirement, or was it just something the AI picked up on from past data that might not actually be relevant for this specific role? You see?
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not about replacing human judgment completely, but giving recruiters more information so they can make better, fairer decisions.
Precisely. And, this source argues that transparency isn't just good for the candidates, it's crucial for building trust in these AI recruitment systems overall. If companies can't explain how their AI is making decisions, people are going to be a lot less likely to embrace it.
Right. It's like even if the AI is making perfectly fair decisions, if nobody knows how it's doing it, it's still going to create all this skepticism and distrust.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why this whole conversation about explainability is so crucial, because it's not just a technical challenge. It's about building this foundation of transparency and accountability in AI recruitment.
This is so interesting. It's like AI is forcing us to really examine our own biases and figure out how to build systems that are actually fairer than what we had before.
Absolutely, and that's where things get really interesting. This source dives into some very specific strategies for building these ethical AI models, from diversifying the training data to conducting regular, fairness audits to check for bias and things like that.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. What does it mean to diversify training data in the context of recruitment? And what exactly is a fairness audit?
Good questions. So let's start with diversifying the training data. Essentially, what that means is making sure that the information that the AI learns from reflects a really broad range of backgrounds, experiences, skills. Like, think about it. If you only feed in AI resumes from people who graduated from, say, Ivy League schools, it might learn to prioritize those candidates over others, even if their education isn't directly relevant to the job, right?
So you're saying it's about making sure that the AI isn't accidentally picking up on like irrelevant patterns in the data and then mistaking them for like indicators of job success.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, a fairness audit is kind of like a regular checkup, but for your AI system. Basically, it involves testing the AI to see if it's making biased decisions
Hmm.
and then, making adjustments as needed.
It sounds like this idea of ongoing monitoring is really important. It's not enough to just like build an AI system and then just hope for the best. You have to constantly check for bias and make sure that it's still aligned with your, ethical principles.
Absolutely. And this source really emphasizes that, again, it's not just about the technology itself, it's about building a culture of ethical AI within organizations. Companies need to establish clear guidelines, they need to provide training, create processes for, identifying and mitigating bias at every stage of the AI lifecycle.
So it's not just a tech problem, it's a people problem too. Like, you could have the most sophisticated AI in the world, but if the people who are developing it and using it don't have like a really strong ethical compass, things can still go wrong.
Precisely. Building ethical AI requires a real shift in mindset. It's about embedding these ethical considerations into every step of the process, from data collection to model development to deployment and beyond.
It's almost like AI is like holding up a mirror to our own biases in a way,
Absolutely.
isn't it? And forcing us to confront them head on.
Yeah, it really is. And actually, the source brings up a whole other layer to all of this, which is privacy. These AI systems are often analyzing huge amounts of data about candidates, right? So, how do we make sure that that's being done ethically and responsibly?
That's a really good point. Because on the one hand, you want the AI to have enough information so it can actually make informed decisions. But on the other hand, like you don't want it digging into people's personal lives in some like creepy big brother way.
Exactly, exactly. And this source digs into some of the regulations that are starting to emerge around AI and data privacy. Like you've got GDPR, you've got CCPA, and these regulations set some pretty strict limits on how companies can collect, store, and use personal data.
So companies can't just like go scraping data from social media profiles or like online forums without the candidate even knowing about it.
Right. They need to be very clear about what data they're collecting and why, and they need to get explicit permission from those candidates before they use their data for any kind of AI-driven recruitment.
It's interesting how AI is kind of pushing us to rethink these like fundamental ideas about privacy and data protection in the digital age.
It really is. It really is. And it's not just about like complying with the regulations either.
Yeah.
This source argues that it's about respecting people's autonomy, giving them a sense of agency over their own data. Like job seekers should be informed that AI is being used in the hiring process, and they should have the right to know what data is being collected about them and how it's actually being used.
Transparency is key. But kind of shifting gears a bit here, we've talked a lot about the potential pitfalls of AI in recruitment. But this source also highlights how AI can actually be a tool for promoting diversity and inclusion. So how does that work?
Well, for starters, AI can help to identify and mitigate bias in the hiring process itself. Like, for example, it can be used to screen resumes and cover letters for, let's say, gendered language, or to flag, potentially biased interview questions, things like that.
So instead of perpetuating bias, AI can actually be used to help counteract it.
Exactly, exactly. In fact, there are companies out there that are already using AI to, anonymize resumes. So that
Mm.
way the recruiters don't see the candidate's name or their gender or their ethnicity before they make that initial screening decision. So it helps to kind of level the playing field a bit. And it ensures that candidates are actually being evaluated based solely on their skills and experience.
That's a really great example. It's like using AI to help us see past our own unconscious biases in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And some companies are even using AI to analyze their recruitment data, to identify patterns of bias that they might not even be aware of, and then take steps to address those biases. Like, are they consistently overlooking candidates from a certain background or with specific qualifications? AI can really help to bring that to light.
Yeah. It sounds like AI can be this really powerful tool for promoting like fairness and inclusion, but only if it's designed and used with those goals in mind from the very beginning.
Exactly. This source really argues that it's not enough to simply not be biased. Like, we need to be actively anti-bias in our approach to AI development and deployment. We need to really think critically about the data we're using, the algorithms that we're building, the outcomes that we're measuring, and make sure that they're all aligned with our values of diversity and inclusion.
Right. It's like that saying, what gets measured gets managed.
Yep.
So if we want more diverse and inclusive workplaces, then we actually have to start measuring and optimizing for that. But this all sounds like a lot for companies to navigate. Like, where do they even begin?
Well, this source suggests that they can start by conducting a really comprehensive audit of their current recruitment process. Where are the potential points of bias? What data are they collecting? How are they using it? And then once they have like a really clear understanding of their starting point, they can start exploring how AI can be used to address those specific challenges.
Right. It's like, don't just jump on the AI bandwagon because
Yeah.
it's trendy, right? You really have to have a plan and make sure that AI is actually the right tool for the job.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to like bring in diverse perspectives too. This source really stresses that the teams that are actually developing and deploying these AI systems, they need to reflect the diversity of the workforce that they're trying to build.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
And you need people with different backgrounds and experiences to like point out those potential blind spots and
Yeah.
make sure that the AI is being designed and used in a way that actually benefits everyone.
Precisely. And it's an ongoing process too. This source talks about the importance of continuous learning and improvement because, the field of AI is constantly evolving. So companies really need to kind of stay up to date on the latest research, the best practices, and the regulations.
It sounds like ethical AI recruitment is a journey. It's not like a destination. You're never
Yeah.
really done.
Exactly. It requires ongoing vigilance, adaptation, a commitment to doing the right thing, even when it's hard. And this source actually suggests that it's not solely the responsibility of companies either. Like, job seekers have a role to play in all of this too.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean? What can job seekers do?
Well, for one, they can start by educating themselves about how AI is being used in recruitment in the first place and advocating for their own privacy and fairness.
So, like, if a job seeker sees something that seems kind of fishy, like let's say an application that's asking for information that feels kind of irrelevant to the job, they should like speak up.
Exactly. They can ask questions, voice their concerns, choose to support companies that are actually, committed to ethical AI practices.
Right, that makes sense. It creates more accountability when everyone's kind of informed and engaged in the conversation. But realistically, how much power do individual job seekers actually have in this whole landscape? It can feel pretty one-sided sometimes, right?
Oh, you're absolutely right. It can. And this source brings up a really interesting point about the power dynamics at play here. Because, we are seeing more and more regulations and standards starting to emerge around ethical AI, which is a good thing for sure. But ultimately, a lot of this comes down to companies choosing to do the right thing, even when it's not legally required.
So it's not just about what's legal, it's about what's right.
Exactly, exactly. And that's where consumer pressure and public perception can play a really big role. Because if companies start seeing that job seekers are turned off by unethical AI practices, they're going to be a lot more likely to actually prioritize those issues.
Right, it's like this form of collective action almost. Like job seekers really do have power in numbers, even if it doesn't always feel like it.
Exactly. And it's not just about punishing the bad actors, it's about rewarding the companies that are actually getting it right.
Hmm.
By supporting companies that are committed to ethical AI, job seekers can help to incentivize this race to the top where ethical AI becomes the norm, not the exception.
I like that, a race to the top. So it sounds like ethical AI in recruitment isn't just a tech issue. It's not just a legal issue. It's a societal issue. We all kind of have a role to play in shaping how this technology is developed and used.
Absolutely. And the source really frames it as a call to action for everyone to kind of get involved in this conversation, whether you're a tech developer, a recruiter, a policymaker, a job seeker. Like, this is an issue that affects us all.
It's like we're all stakeholders in this new frontier of AI and work.
Exactly. And we need to work together to make sure that AI is used to create a more just, equitable, and inclusive future of work for everyone.
Wow. You've really given us a lot to think about here. So where do we go from here? Like, if a company really wants to make sure that they're using AI ethically in their recruitment, what are some, like, concrete steps that they can take?
Well, this source really emphasizes that it's not just a set it and forget it kind of situation. It's really about building a culture of like continuous learning and improvement around this stuff.
So it's not enough to just, like, build an AI system and assume that it's going to be ethically sound, forever.
Exactly. And this source actually recommends these regular fairness audits as like one way to try to catch those potential problems early on. So it's basically, testing the AI to see if it's making biased decisions and then, making adjustments as needed.
It's like giving your AI like a regular ethics checkup
Right.
to make sure it's still aligned with your company values.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's not a one-time thing either. This source is really like stresses that this needs to be like an ongoing process because,
Mhm.
the field of AI is constantly evolving. So companies need to stay up to date on all the latest research, the best practices, the regulations, all of that.
Yeah. It's like any other system, really.
Yeah.
You need to maintain it, you need to update it, you need to make sure that it's still serving its intended purpose.
Precisely. And, this source actually argues that companies need to be prepared to adapt too, because what might have been considered like best practice, a few years ago might not be good enough anymore.
It is a lot for companies to kind of stay on top of. Do you think it's actually realistic to expect them to prioritize ethical AI, especially when there were always like so many other competing priorities, from a business standpoint?
Yeah, it's a valid question. And this source kind of suggests that it really comes down to how companies weigh the risks and rewards at the end of the day. Because on the one hand, ignoring ethical AI can lead to some pretty serious consequences. You're talking about lawsuits, reputational damage, even, losing out on top talent.
Yeah, that's a pretty high price to pay,
Yeah,
especially in, today's competitive job market.
exactly. Exactly. But on the other hand, investing in ethical AI, it can be a real differentiator for companies. This source really highlights how it can help them, attract and retain top talent, improve employee engagement, even drive innovation.
So it's not just about like avoiding risk. It's about like actually gaining a competitive advantage by doing this.
Precisely. And this source even goes so far as to suggest that it's not just good for business, it's just like the right thing to do, period. Like, we
Right.
have this moral obligation to use this technology in a way that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Yeah. That's a really powerful point. It's like beyond, the legal incentives, beyond the financial incentives even.
Yeah.
There's like a human element here that we can't ignore.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's a really good note to end on, actually. We've spent this whole deep dive exploring some really complex challenges around AI and recruitment. But ultimately, it really comes down to our shared responsibility to build a future where technology is used to create a more just and equitable world for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. It's definitely a conversation that we need to keep having. And, we all have a part to play in that. So thank you for joining us for this deep dive. And be sure to tune in next time as we take another deep dive into the fascinating world around us.
Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to stay updated with the latest episodes and exclusive content designed to enhance your recruitment strategies.